Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast brought to you by our friends over at Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, Briar Greaves Insurance are the best people in the business to work with. For more information, go to briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. It is a Tuesday edition of the Pewter Report podcast on this 4th of July week. It's the first day of July, so that means we are within a month of Bucs training camp. It is coming right around the corner just a couple of weeks from now. We are very excited. And because of that, we're going to talk a little bit more about Bucs training camp today. The Bucs players that must start out camp hot. And this could be for a couple of different reasons. There are players that are fighting for a roster spot, like Cameron Johnson, who you see on the screen right there. There are a couple of other players that we have questions on. Are they going to be on the team longer than this season? There's a couple of starting roles that might be up for grabs. And of course, with one particular player, do they still have it after building up a resume of being a big-time player? So a lot to get into on today's show. We'll get to some questions and comments as well. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Scott Reynolds is not here again today. So joining us is a very special guest. You can find him on the Locked On Bucs podcast. Subscribe to their YouTube channel. It is James Yarko. James, thank you so much for joining the show this afternoon. How are we doing?
I'm doing well. Always a pleasure to jump on with you guys. I love chatting and catching up with you guys when we see each other in Indy or when I make a trip to Tampa. So it's always fun to jump on here and chat it up with the Pewter Report gang.
Yeah, always a great time when I get to talk with you. You've been on the show before, and it was a blast, and we got great feedback. So it was like, why not have him on again? Of course, we got the Bailey Adams connection as well that really brings us all together. Shout out to Bailey, as David Stackman says. What up, my dude, James Yarko? Let's go. Yeah, appreciate everybody coming into the chat. We'll get to some questions and comments as well. Of course, Super Chats get to cut the line. But one thing I like to do when we have guests on is kind of get everyone's opinions on some of the latest recent news with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And of course, that started at the end of last week with Todd Bowles and Jason Licht both signing contract extensions to remain as the head coach in Todd Bowles' case and the general manager in Jason Licht in his case. So, James, just give me your initial reaction to what you were thinking when the news broke, and specifically with Todd Bowles. Are you on board with it? Because it feels like Jason Licht, everybody universally loved it, and understandably so. But it seems like there's a difference of opinion a little bit when it comes to Todd Bowles.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just they're still unsure about Todd, I guess is the best way to put it. You know, he has his ups and his downs. But for me personally, you take a look at what he's done, and, you know, his first year as the head coach, obviously it was kind of a late announcement with Bruce kind of retiring out of nowhere. And I would say that Todd Bowles was probably the perfect coach for the Bucs, the same way Baker Mayfield was the perfect quarterback for the Bucs to navigate the post-Brady, era. These were two guys. Todd had his struggles in New York. Everybody has struggles in New York. I think it's just kind of what happens now. But he's done things in Tampa that no other coach has done. And I don't care if it's considered a weak division in the NFC South. Divisions have their ebbs and flows across the league all the time. So it's like he's doing his job. He's doing what he needs to do to win divisions and to put them in the postseason. And then from there, you just need an invitation to the dance. And then anything can happen. We saw that with the Commanders last year, upsetting Detroit and making their run to the NFC Championship. So I thought it was well-deserved. And I kind of hope that this squashes any hot seat talk, because right before the announcement, we were already seeing people talk about Todd Bowles as starting the year on the hot seat. And that's not something that I think he deserves. And, there's a chance that the Bucs go 4-13 this year, but there would be extenuating circumstances and Todd Bowles shouldn't be punished for that. So I was excited. It's great continuity. Players love playing for Todd, and it helps continue this run that the Bucs have been on.
Yeah, for sure. I think context is very important because to me, I don't really care what happens this season unless the Bucks win like 2 games and everybody's healthy. Unless that's the scenario, I don't think by any means should Todd Bowles be on the hot seat. And I hate like the
Right.
outside noise of pro football talk being like, oh well, Bill Belichick, like let's get him
Oh,
in Tampa, and it's like you're trying to speak it into existence more than anything else, or more than like the legitimacy of it. Excuse me, and that comes from, rumors of like, oh, Todd Bowles is going to retire. There's a big difference between Todd Bowles saying, I am going to not coach until like my last breath at the age of 90 years old or however long versus I'm going to retire at some point. But everyone floating out like, oh, he's going to retire right away just is not true. I mean, he's 61 years old. Realistically, he can coach till 65 and then retire, still have 4 more years of coaching and, can go on and live his golden years as well. So I think it's not fair for Todd to be on the hot seat this year by any means. But let me ask you, what are your expectations for the Bucs this season in terms of like how much slack does Todd Bowles get to, because we want to see improvement this year. We don't want to see a first round exit. In your eyes, how far do the Bucs have to get this year for in 2026 to be like, okay, it's now or never?
Wow. I would say even just, a postseason appearance, I think you're still sticking with this group, right? And again, we saw last year they make it to the postseason with extenuating circumstances. No Chris Godwin for more than half the year. No Mike Evans for an entire month, and
Yeah.
they were bringing in parking lot attendants off of Dale Mabry to play
Shout out
corner.
Ryan Miller. Corner. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an absolute disaster from an injury standpoint. So, I think I would be pretty confident that this is a team that is going to win the division and then probably make some noise in the postseason. And I've said on my show, the Bucs should be talked about in the same breath as the Eagles and the Lions and the Chiefs and the Bills. Like, they have all this talent. You hope that they stay healthy on the defensive side of the ball, but even just offensively, they can go toe to toe with absolutely anybody in the league. Only team in the postseason last year that was top 4 in rushing and passing. So, this is one of the best teams in the NFL. So I would say making the postseason, that's what you want to see. A first round exit would be, in my opinion, kind of disappointing given the talent, but I don't think it would be anything that would cause a stir of, okay, it wouldn't be Dungy losing to the Eagles and then everybody knowing that he's gone at that point. I don't think it's reached that level yet.
I agree. I don't think it's there yet. I think in a weird way, Baker Mayfield, it might be just as much on him as it is Todd, because, there's only been, one playoff win for Baker in Tampa versus, he also had one in Cleveland. But at the same time, like, Baker's only a win or two away from tying Lamar Jackson for playoff wins as well. So it's always a slippery slope and a tricky situation when it comes to, how far to go in the postseason. I think you got to look at the next 2 years, this upcoming season in 2026. I think within the next 2 years, I think Tampa Bay needs to at least get into an NFC championship game scenario. Then maybe if not, you can go, all right, like everything's on the table this year. Like either you're getting to the NFC championship game or then you have to highly, reconsider, either coaching change. Who knows? 3 years from now, like who knows if Mike Evans is playing? Who knows how good Chris Godwin looks? There's so many different variables. But how much do you think the lack of success on primetime last season kind of impacts the overall outlook of the Bucs going into this year?
I think that's more fans being frustrated than anything. And they bludgeoned the Eagles in primetime in the playoffs. So we know they can win in primetime. And it seems like primetime has just been one of those situations where it's like one or two things go wrong at the most inopportune time. And I go back as far as, the Hail Mary against the Bills at the very end when there were not one, but two blatant pass interference penalties that didn't get called. And it's like, that changes the game. If it's a penalty in the second quarter, it should be a penalty on the last play of the game. The Falcons last year, the Bucs thought they had it wrapped up. Levante being Levante and gets I can't remember if it was an interception or a fumble recovery. Whatever. Lavonte got a turnover.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden things fall apart again. And it seems like they're almost snake bit. I fully expect that. And of course I'll reserve the right to change my mind once we get into week
Sure.
2, but I expected to blow the doors off of Houston and just make that their kind of their first statement of the year of like, look, this is a team that we choked against a couple of years ago. And now we're in prime time where we've struggled in the last couple of years, but this is a team to be reckoned with. And so I kind of feel, obviously you want to beat the Falcons in week 1, but
Yeah.
I feel like week 2 is the opportunity for them to have their first true statement game of the year before they come up on the Eagles and then the Niners and the Lions and kind of that gauntlet. And then hopefully we'll see a couple of throwbacks against the Seahawks there for that game. But yeah, that would be cool. Both teams came into the league together. That would be the appropriate time to do it, but I digress. So yeah, I think a lot of people put way more stock into the primetime stuff and the uniforms than I do. Like, people get up in arms about they wear their whites at home. Who cares? Like, as long as they win football games, who cares what they're wearing?
I agree to a certain extent. It's just I get it why they do it in like September and October. And last year was fine. They mixed it up a lot, but it felt like, Baker's first year, maybe Brady's last year, it was 90% the white uniforms, and then like they wore the red uniforms twice. And to me, that's annoying because every team has white in the uniforms. They wear it on the road. I get it. You want the advantage for Tampa Bay when you're playing in Raymond James Stadium. This year it'll be week 3 when they host the Jets for the home opener. I get you want the advantage then. And I also understand like when you're the road team, odds are you're going to wear the white. But if you want to front load in the beginning, that's fine. But like wear the red as much as you can towards the end of the season. You're the Buccaneers. You wear red. Those are your colors. So I would like to see it balance out a little bit more. I think they've done better with that too.
Or can we bring back the pewter uniforms just for a week? The last time they wore it was Thanksgiving weekend in 23 against Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And that was a game Baker got hurt and
Kyle Trask got that goal line appearance.
Yeah, freaking Gardner Minshew went absolutely crazy. I was there for that one. That one still bothers me. But yeah, it's been forever since they've worn the pewters. Mix those in too, because those are some of the best alternate uniforms in the league.
I mean, of course, Pewter Report, we are biased. We have to love the pewter jerseys. But yeah, it's a nice, different look. I mean, let's face it. The NFL is all about money. It's all about selling jerseys and stuff like that. So why not, go with that pewter jersey? It started out great, too. I think they first wore it against Denver in the 2020 season. And there was the blocked punt by Pat O'Connor. I believe they started out 2-0 in the pewter jerseys. Then it kind of took a turn. They wore it against the Rams and they didn't win. And as you mentioned, the Indy game, they didn't win. But I would certainly love to see that. We know the home creamsicles are returning this upcoming season. But there's another bit of news, and you alluded to it a little bit before, that it looks like we're going to see some road creamsicles this year. And that means that the Bucs will be wearing presumably white jersey, but with creamsicle pants. The Bucs tweeted out a little teaser, I guess, if you will, today. It looked like Steve Spurrier, the former Bucs quarterback way back in the day, was in a video. What are your thoughts about that announcement? And it does make all the perfect sense in the world for it to be Bucs against Seattle earlier in that season, since it's both the 50th year for each team.
Yeah, I'm super excited if that's actually what they're doing, which, I'm fairly confident that it is. But I've always preferred the white with the creamsicle versus the actual creamsicle jersey. Now I like both of them. I'm one of those people, but it's such a clean look with the creamsicle outline, the red numbers. It's such a nice look. And I know there's quite a few Bucs fans that have been wanting to purchase that style of jersey for years. And it just, even when they brought back the creamsicles back in the Josh Freeman era, that was something that was never available. So I know a lot of people are excited about it. My son has already started bothering me that he wants, both versions of a Benjamin Morrison jersey. And I told him, well, you have a job now. Pick up more hours. It's summertime. You can buy them yourself.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about Benjamin Morrison in a little bit for sure. One last question for you about the creamsicles, and I agree. Like, they are, in my opinion, the best throwback uniforms in the league. Of course, the Eagles Kelly Green is a good argument as well. But of course, we're gonna lean towards the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're wearing it. We can speculate about the road game, as we said. We think it's going to be against Seattle. But we do know for a fact it is against the Falcons this year, Thursday night football. I don't mind it because I like the idea of canceling out the two issues with the Bucs, and that's winning in the creamsicle jerseys and winning in primetime. And if you want to add a third, it's not being able to beat Atlanta last season. But there's also part of me that just kind of feels like, hey, ensure a win in the creamsicle jerseys as much as you possibly can. Why not make this game against the Saints, who I get it, it's the NFL, like there's no guarantees. You can only do so much. But that's the most winnable game at home on the schedule. You could say the Jets too, but it's the first home game of the season, so I don't know if you would do it then. But why not do it against the Saints, where you give yourself the best chance to win, and then it quiets a lot of the haters that don't like when the Bucs wear the creamsicle because of the way that they've lost.
I think it was kind of, as you put it, you're canceling two things out, the losing streak in the creamsicles and the primetime. Hopefully they've exercised the primetime demons long before that game takes place. But what I love about that selection, and to me, it wasn't about the opponent, it was about when the game was played. And as much as I love, a lot of the different pre and post game shows and all that, the Amazon crew kind of cuts loose a little bit more than some of these other ones. So, they are going to be all in on that theme, and they're gonna ham it up. Fitzmagic's gonna ham it up. Yeah. I'm sure Richard Sherman is gonna play into it as well. We're going to get great stories from Al Michaels during the broadcast about his experience, over the last 50 years when he's covered Bucs games. But then just to have that in front of a national audience when you're doing the orange out and giving away t-shirts to everybody in attendance, I think just the optics is going to make it so much more fun and probably going to get the crowd a little bit more into it as well. So I think that's kind of where they wanted to go with that one. It wasn't so much about playing the Falcons as it was, let's put these uniforms on when we're the only game on. It's prime time, national audience. This is going to kick off that week and really have a lot of fun with it. Because I think since they brought this back, the Bucs have done a really good job. The city of Tampa has done a really good job of making it like a week-long event and really building it all up. So to have that kind of come to a head on a Thursday night, I thought was a great decision.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you make. Obviously, getting those jerseys in prime time, and you're right. The community has done a ton. Excuse me, except for the Bucs just winning, but they've done everything else that they possibly can with those uniforms. I think there'll be a little extra excitement too, because a big thing for me as well for the Bucs this year is we expect them to win the division, but don't clinch the division in the last week of the season. Win it,
right?
In week 17 or week 16. I know the Thursday night game might be a little bit too early, but the Bucs can certainly put a stranglehold on the division with the win on Thursday night at home in the creamsicles against the Falcons. If we do expect the Falcons to be the toughest competition for the Bucs in the NFC South this year, although I wouldn't rule out the Panthers leapfrogging the Falcons either, because I don't know. The Falcons, to me, feel a little bit like a house of cards. There's certainly talent. Don't get me wrong. Bijan Robinson's great. Drake London seems to annihilate the Bucs every time they play, especially in Atlanta. But to me, I thought it was an okay draft by the Falcons, but I'm not sitting here being like, oh my God, like these two edge rushers, it's going to be too much for Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke specifically. To me, if Atlanta doesn't have the answer with Michael Penix Jr., they're not going to fall to the Saints level, but I think it's a great opportunity for Carolina to jump ahead of Atlanta, excuse me.
Yeah, well, and we saw when Bryce Young came back after being benched for Dalton, he really started to look like a number one pick. He started to kind of find his groove and his rhythm, and I think he and Canales were really starting to get in sync, and they gave the Bucs plenty of trouble, and That's a team that, I've talked about, especially with Evan Klosky of 10 Tampa Bay, who's on every week. He and I have talked extensively about, the Panthers might be the team that the Bucs need to worry about. I'm not sold on Penix. He's not sold on Penix. So maybe the Bucs should be a little bit more concerned about what Carolina can do and what Dave Canales is going to be able to do in his second year there with that offense and all the additions that they've made. That's really where the division is going to come down at the end of the season when they have the Panthers a couple of times in the last month. That's really where they're going to be able to make or break, any postseason appearance.
Yeah, let's not forget the Bucs barely won in that game in Carolina. It took an Anthony Nelson forced fumble to really save that game and win it. So yeah, certainly just knowing how Dave Canales is very well aware of the personnel that Tampa Bay has, it should make for a really competitive matchup, particularly in Carolina this upcoming season. And man, Dade City, Dade County, they got to understand where their loyalty is, man. They're giving Michael Penix Jr. a street name, even though like they're closer to Tampa and where the Bucs play. So come on, man. All right, let's get into today's topic. Of course, we're talking about Bucs players that must have a hot start to training camp. We are in July. It's getting scorching hot out there, really, no matter where you live in the United States. So we're going to talk about a couple of players that are on this list that I put on this list for different reasons. Not everybody's fighting for a roster spot. Not everyone's fighting for a starting spot. Some are. So we're going to get into a couple of different examples, a couple of different scenarios. But I want to start with the linebacker position and SirVocea Dennis particularly. Now, he's had some great OTAs, some great mini camps taking the football away, but this is truly the first year that SirVocea Dennis is coming into a situation in the Bucs inside linebacker room. We know Lavonte David, the legend, the hopefully future Hall of Famer, but definitely future Ring of Honor member, is starting in one spot. I went into minicamp not loving the overall depth of the Bucs inside linebackers, and now I'm a big fan of it. Now Todd Bowles, in his words, persuaded me a little bit as well. But this is the first true opportunity for SirVocea Dennis to take the ball and run with it, whether it's better pass coverage, whether it's solidifying himself as an every game starter and not platooning with, say, Anthony Walker Jr. or Deion Jones or whatever the case may be. So what are your thoughts about SirVocea Dennis going into this season? Can he be the future starter of the Bucs at inside linebacker at a position that is widely coveted in Tampa Bay, going from Hardy Nickerson to Derek Brooks and, of course, Lavonte David as well?
The phrase that I've continuously used is cautiously optimistic. And you kind of alluded to it. We've seen flashes from SirVocea Dennis, both in training camp and in the regular season. But now this is the first opportunity that we're going to get to see him play healthy. He was dealing with a shoulder injury ever since college, finally got it surgically repaired, and is going to, we hope, be at full strength this season. So I think he's a guy that has an extremely high ceiling, but I also love what they did in bringing in Anthony Walker and retaining Deion Jones and having kind of that, that rotation there where if SirVocea doesn't end up being anything more than a situational linebacker, they still have guys that can play all three downs at any time. So while it doesn't have the flash and the pizzazz of Devin White, coming out of college or coming off of the Super Bowl run, I am relatively confident, again, cautiously optimistic, that SirVocea is going to be able to be the right fit next to Lavonte David and allow him to kind of go back to being who he is, since he kind of had to play two positions last year to compensate for, the lack of skill next to him, regardless of who it was. So I'm excited to see what the two of them can do together and what SirVocea brings when he's at full tilt, which isn't something that we've ever really gotten to see. So I don't love what they've done. I talked about linebacker a ton during the pre-draft process, and they stuck with it, and they were more than happy with what they had. So let's see how this shakes out. But Todd Bowles, I'm kind of with you. He kind of won me over a little bit in his glowing remarks about Walker and how he's playing like he's been here for years and he already understands everything. And So I have the confidence in the depth if Servassier isn't anything more than just kind of that blitzing inside linebacker that you put out there on third downs.
I mean, we all know a huge weakness of this team last season was the pass coverage, specifically by inside linebackers. And that's why, I pretty much bet the over on receiving yards for whoever the opposing tight end was each week in and week out, just because it seemed like every week the tight end was absolutely dominating. So I don't think there's any question that the depth, specifically at inside linebacker, is way better this year than it was last year, just from speed alone. KJ Britt was more of a thumper, maybe a little bit better stopping the run, but he doesn't have the speed and the quickness that, Anthony Walker Jr. does. I also love the fact that Anthony Walker is living at Lavonte David's house. At least he was for mandatory minicamp. So a guy that already has great chemistry, great understanding with Lavonte, going back to, growing up together in the Miami area. And I think we forget too, like Deion Jones didn't sign with the team last year until like December. He was only there a couple of weeks. So this is kind of a fresh start for him as well. It's not like he's been there for quite a while, but I think just having more of the understanding of the defense will be super important. I floated out this idea before because, Servassier Dennis did platoon last year. I think it's important to get the best personnel out there on third downs and things like that. But one thing I've talked about a little bit is I don't think it hurts his legacy or anything like that at all. Maybe potentially platooning Lavonte David a little bit in situations where, Lavonte David's up there in age. He's 30, 34, 35. You want to preserve him as much as you possibly can. We all know how instinctual he is. He's a great blitzer. He's fallen off a little bit in pass coverage. And that's just going to happen when you're, as old as he is. And I'm not trying to, be an ageist or anything like that. I'm in my 30s as well. But what do you think about the idea of maybe, subbing out Lavonte on third down and throwing in Deion Jones or throwing in Anthony Walker to, one, keep Lavonte healthy, but also maybe give you a little bit of a better personnel in a situation where it's third down and the team has to throw it?
Yeah, I don't hate that idea. And, as you said, you want to keep Lavonte healthy. This is a team with championship aspirations. If you're going to win a championship, you need your best players. And Lavonte David has been one of, if not the best defensive player on this team since 2012. So if you're going to spell him a little bit more and not have him take, 85, 90% of the defensive snaps, then yeah, there are going to be situations where it's like, let's get Voss and let's get Deion out there, so that we have some coverage, but we have more speed. We have guys that are going to be able to drop back a little bit quicker. I'm kind of torn on it too, because it's like I don't love taking somebody with his instincts and his IQ off the field on a crucial down. But at the same time, I would rather him be on the field for a crucial third down in the NFC Championship than in week 6. Mm-hmm. So I don't hate that idea, but it's not something I would want to see them do a ton. I think it would basically boil down to certain situations. This is the package that we need to send out there because it's all of our fastest guys, for blitzing and, sideline to sideline. We got to make sure that we protect, this yard line. Don't let them get past it. So yeah, I could see them doing that again. Lavonte, 30, 34, 35 years old. He's a youngin. I've reached my 40s now. He's a young whippersnapper. He's got plenty of legs left.
I hope he keeps playing. I know everyone keeps thinking it's going to be his last year, and maybe it probably is, but also never say never. We'll see how far the Bucs go this year. I think winning another Super Bowl and adding as many stats as he possibly can will help with that Hall of Fame resume, especially the more that the Bucs win. Of course, if only they could have won a little bit more, earlier in his career, I think there'd be a little bit more attention. But we know Lavonte David is good to go. His job is safe this upcoming season. But there's been a lot of talk about don't make a scene Jamel Dean. Now, certainly the Bucs address depth everywhere at corner, drafting Benjamin Morrison, drafting Jacob Parrish. They signed Kindle Vildor. They re-signed Bryce Hall, and presumably he's going to play more than just the first game of the season. So you have Zion and you have Jamel Dean. We've talked a lot on this show as every Bucs show and fans and media have talked about like whether or not to keep Jamel Dean. And they're obviously going to keep Jamel Dean this year. But it seems like the addition of Benjamin Morrison specifically, and to a degree, Jacob Parrish as well, I think it's going to push, and it could push Ryan McCollum too. He is in a contract year. It's going to push both of them. But I think for Jamel Dean, because of his injury history, because of his, inability to take the football away, where Benjamin Morrison was the guy that intercepted the football a lot at Notre Dame, I think it's important for Jamel Dean to have a good start to training camp. Now, Morrison has to come back, from his hip injury, and he practiced a little bit, but then he sat out the last 2 days of minicamp. So, we'll see what's up for the start of training camp. But to me, Jamel Dean's got to show that he's the guy once again, because I don't know if it's going to be, a changing of the guard in week 1. But I think before the season is done, we could see Benjamin Morrison replacing Jamel Dean, particularly, whether it's because availability or lack of turnovers, and the Bucs just going with the new regime and the guys that they drafted this year.
Yeah, 100%. And you and I were kind of talking about it before we started, that we were having a lot of conversations about Benjamin Morrison at the combine, because that was my dude.
Yeah.
He was the one that I was really pounding the table for on my show. And my phone has never blown up the way that it did after the Bucs drafted Benjamin Morrison. I didn't have people text me that much when Brady signed as I did when Morrison got drafted. It was crazy, but yeah, this is 100% a very real situation for Jamel Dean. If he doesn't start off hot, or if he, we all kind of assume he's going to go down at some point because of injury, whether that's during a game or heading into a week or whatever it is, I don't think he gets his job back. If he goes down and Morrison becomes the starter, I don't think Dean gets his job back, because Morrison is that talented. This is a guy who was a consensus top 20, arguably top 15 pick before his hip injury. And now all of a sudden the Bucs get him in the second round, and he does still have to work his way all the way back. I was disappointed that he had missed the last 2 days of mandatory minicamp, but at the same time, you don't want him to come back too quick. What he was able to accomplish going through, the combine process, and then suffering an injury setback during that, and then still being able to ramp it up for his individual pro day, all of that has taken a lot of work for him to be able to do. So once training camp kicks off, that's my number 2 battle to watch, is the cornerbacks. I'm with you. I think Zion and Dean are your week 1 starters, barring any kind of injury, which we hope doesn't happen. But the amount of corners battling for 1 or 2 spots at the back end of this depth chart is wild. So between that and then wide receivers, which I know we're going to talk about later, those are the top 2 battles to watch for me in training camp, is who's going to separate themselves and make this roster. And Jamel Dean, I think it was something that you, Bailey, and I talked about as well, that I didn't think Dean was going to even make it this far. I thought he was going to be cut when free agency started, because they could have gotten out from that contract. So depth obviously hurt him last year. Maybe they weren't willing to risk that, but I think this is probably Dean's last year with the Bucs, unless he really just takes off, plays all 17 games, secures the football when he's able to get his hands on it. It's wild to me that this was the guy that had, multiple interceptions off Aaron Rodgers, but then hasn't been able to catch a ball since.
Yeah, that was a crazy game when Dean had that pick 6 and all of those things. And I think it's part of the double whammy with Jamel Dean. It's not just that he gets injured, it's that he doesn't take the football away. If he was taking the football away, you can live with the injuries a little bit. Or if he was healthy for all 17 games, previously 16 games when that was their schedule and everything like that. And the fact that he doesn't have any more guaranteed money, I think, is a big thing, because they're going to have to allocate some money for Zion McCollum. And another issue with Jamel Dean a little bit is the fact that it's not that he gets injured, it's that he'll get hurt in games and early in games. And that's kind of what's really screws you over in these situations. If you know on Friday that Jamel Dean is injured and you're not going to play, well, then you can kind of prepare some of the other guys like Tyreek Funderburk. And even saying that name out loud, it's like, damn, like the depth has really improved this offseason. No disrespect to Tyreek Funderburk, but the fact that you get hurt like in the first quarter and then you're just really, you got your hands tied. You can't call someone up from the practice squad. You can only activate so many guys before the game starts. And then you look at Benjamin Morrison, and I don't have the exact quote verbatim, but as you mentioned, we were talking at the combine, and I believe you pretty much said, "I am willing to die on that hill that Benjamin Morrison is the best corner in the draft." It to me, and it's apples and oranges, different positions and stuff like that. But I think Benjamin Morrison is going to go down as a similar case when the Bucs drafted Antoine Winfield Jr. in the second round, where Winfield, I think, was pushed back more than anything else because he dealt with some injuries at Minnesota, where he would have been a first-round talent. Of course, he's got the namesake. I mean, Benjamin Morrison's dad played in the NFL as well, was teammates with Todd Bowles, but Antoine Winfield Jr.'s dad was known a little bit more. But I think Benjamin Morrison, first-round talent, a guy that took the ball away, a guy that will line up and say, give me your best wide receiver, and, I'm going to shut him down for an entire game. I love having that type of corner. I think it's kind of few and far between in today's NFL. And, I think there's going to be that comparison from Winfield to Morrison. Again, different positions, but in the same sense of like, Bucs got a steal on a guy with the first-round talent that they got in the second round.
Yeah, well, and, I love Morrison's attitude. I was listening to oh my goodness, I cannot remember the name of the show. The Outliers podcast. Benjamin Morrison was a guest over there. He's already circled the Bills game. Like, the Bills are like his number one enemy because they told him that they were going to come up and get him. And instead they draft Maxwell Hairston, and then they trade up again in the second round and they take a defensive lineman. And he's like, here I was, I would have bet money that I was going to be a Buffalo Bill. And instead I fall to Tampa. And he goes, things happen for a reason. He goes, but I hope that's my first multi-interception game off of Josh Allen. And he gets 2 cracks at the Bills. I realize the first one's preseason and he's probably not going to face Josh Allen, but Morrison's probably going to see significant snaps in that preseason game. And then to turn around and get him again in Buffalo in November, like I would be willing to bet that he's a starter by then, because of performance or because of injury. He will have been able to get on the field and be a starting corner at that point. And so he's going to get plenty of opportunity. I'm also looking forward, if he's the starter, I'm looking forward to that Arizona Cardinals game, because for those that didn't follow him in college, when Notre Dame and Ohio State played in 2023, he absolutely dominated Marvin Harrison Jr. in that game. And, Harrison Jr. was a top 5 pick. So, that's the kind of skill that he brings, which is why I was so confident, and I was willing to die on that hill that he was the best corner in the draft, and why I was so excited that the Bucs were able to snag him.
Yeah, that's a good call right there with the that matchup again, because that was such an exciting game and such an exciting matchup as well. And with the bye, they play the Bills week 11. That bye week is 2 weeks beforehand in week 9, and of course you see a lot of personnel changes during that bye week because you have more time to self scout and things of that nature. So that'd be interesting to see coming out of the bye, depending on how it goes during the season and everything like that. But you could see him start maybe week 10 against New England, take advantage of Drake May and whatever that wide receiver is going to be with the Patriots. I know, they did make a big addition this offseason, but that'll be very interesting. There's no doubt the Bucs certainly added to the depth at corner. They really wanted to, have the insurance that even if one guy goes down, they're going to be filled out in the depth chart in more ways than one. It's also important to make sure you have all your insurance good to go, especially during hurricane season, which unfortunately we are just entering, especially in the state of Florida. But there's nobody better to work with when it comes to your insurance than Briar-Greaves Insurance. If you're a longtime podcast listener, you probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar-Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds has been a Briar-Greaves customer for years, and there simply is not a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar-Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. Whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar-Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. Visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, Grieves. Call their office today at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. And tell them that Pewter Report sent you. We are on with James Yarko. You could follow him. Actually, I'll put it up on the screen, but you could follow him at @JYarko_Bucs. Also, make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Bucs podcast on their YouTube channel. James does a lot of great work over there. Let's get to some super chats, shall we? And comments. Paul Bowen, thanks for the $1.99. This goes back to our Todd Bowles conversation earlier. Says Todd Bowles appreciation post. Yeah, we had Jay Retcher, friend of the program, on the show yesterday. And, he did a poll, as many other people did, getting Bucs fans' thoughts on the extensions and everything like that. And it was like 75% against Todd Bowles. And I understand the issues with, not going for 2 against Kansas City, the timeouts, but everything we've seen this offseason, James, is, moving Larry Foote to outside linebackers coach to, get better production from the outside linebackers and the edge rushers. Hiring Zach Beesline from Jacksonville to help him with the in-game decisions. Being more open and honest at, during off-season interviews and stuff, being like, no, I'm not happy with the depth. I want ball hawks, things like that. And I think everybody wants to dwell on the mistakes without highlighting some of the good stuff that he's done that we talked about early on in the show, whether it was, getting out of these losing streaks or dealing with personnel or becoming the head coach later on than anybody gets hired to be a head coach. For whatever reason, everyone looks at the negative more than the positive when it comes to the TODD, Todd Bowles.
Well, yeah, and it's like, this guy is batting 1,000 on selecting his offensive coordinator. So I'm not putting Byron on him. He inherited Byron late in the process. But you bring in Dave Canales, he gets hired as a head coach. You bring in Liam Cohen, he gets hired as a head coach. Now, they promote Grizzard. And it's like, well, hopefully he doesn't get plucked as a head coach. But if he does, it just means that Todd is continuously picking the right guys. And I think that speaks, volumes compared to some of the mistakes. And yet we all get frustrated with the time management and some of the in-game decisions. I went ballistic after the Ravens game because I thought Todd should have pulled all the starters at that point. And instead, Chris Godwin gets his entire leg spun around in a 360 and gets carted off the field. And I was, pretty angry. But it's like, at the end of the day, he still gets the job done. He has an amazing staff around him. They have, he and Jason work hand in hand to put together a roster that we're all talking about. Bucs fans, Bucs media, we're all talking about being contenders. And, he plays a huge part in that. So again, I think a lot of people get hung up on fixable issues and, get frustrated for how bad the defense was last year. But again, he was working with scraps by week 6. Antoine wasn't healthy all year. Kalijah starts off injured again. You lose Servassier Dennis. You have all of these problems, and they still managed to win one more game than they did the year before and win the division. So he's been doing a great job. I know it's not the result that fans have wanted. They want another Super Bowl. Every fan base does, but Todd's doing a good job. He earned that extension.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, last year there was so much anger about why are you playing so far off the ball and stuff like that, particularly with the corners. And he answered that on our podcast. And I get it. If you don't trust the personnel, you don't trust it. But I don't think he can use that again this year because Jason Light, in my opinion, did a great job of filling any hole on this team, really, whether it was corner, wide receiver, obviously they filled up, linebacker, whatever the case may be. Maybe there's a tiny question about the depth at safety, depending on what you do with, Christian Izzy, and obviously Tyke and Antoine are going to be the starters. But I mean, that's really one question out of every single position on the team and the whole roster. I don't think, you can really slight Jason Light for that one. Deontay London, thanks for the $1.99 super chat. We appreciate it. Says, who do you think our starting defensive backs are week 1? I think it's going to be Zion and Jamel Dean. It would have to take a Herculean effort for Benjamin Morrison to, take over a long-time starter, really for both of them. I know Zion hasn't started for as long, but, he is going into his 4th year. it would have to be a tremendous effort, barring, injury and things of that nature. Parrish, we'll see where he lines up. I know everyone's talking about him playing in the slot, but, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little look at outside as well. But he seems more, set for the nickel corner position. After that, things could change, but Bowles tends to lean towards his veterans if there is a veteran available. He's good at coaching rookie safeties, but he tends to lean towards the veterans if he has them. So I don't see Zion or Jamel Dean really changing.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think it'll be Dean and Zion on the outside. I do think Parrish will win that starting slot corner position, and then Tyke and Antoine in the back there at safeties. And something that I've kind of noticed, that it feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, you can call me out on it, but it feels like they're starting to treat safety the same way they treat their offensive line depth, and that they now have these swing safeties that can also play corner if you need them to. Whereas, we see the offensive line depth that they build. It's guys that can play across all three interior positions, or guys that can play both tackle positions. And it feels like that's kind of the direction they're going in. Maybe it's because of all those injuries last year, but you have Tyke back there who can play safety and nickel. You have Christian Isian, who has played both with the Bucs over the last couple of years and has done well. I feel like that's kind of the direction they're going, just so that if the injury bug hits, Todd has a little bit more flexibility than what he had to deal with last year, which I think is a great approach, as long as you are getting guys that can do it. Tyke can, Isian can. So I think the other real interesting one is whether or not Shiloh's going to find his way onto this team. I think he's a practice squad guy.
Me too.
But just because there's so many DBs that they are going to have to keep. But that's an interesting player for sure. That's I think is going to make some noise for the right reasons during training camp, rather than driving 101 miles an hour on the highway in the city of Cleveland.
Yeah, it's crazy like how much attention, we won't spend too much time on this, but it's crazy how much attention Shador got like at Colorado, and understandably so, with Travis Hunter. And Shiloh was just like an afterthought, and it's right in front of our eyes because he's on the Bucs. But now Shiloh has become like this beloved figure, and his YouTube channel is awesome and it's very entertaining. And Shador's done
dancing
nothing
with
but
dudes in parking lot.
Yeah, in the parking lot. And Shador, it's as you said, like the speeding ticket and a lot of negativity, and Deshaun Watson's going to take him under his wing, and everyone's like, that's a horrible idea. And I think we all agree with that. That's a terrible, disgusting idea. So now Shiloh is like the number one Sanders in the NFL, which is kind of cool to see. I get what you're saying with the attention to the safeties. I think compared to the offensive line, Jason Light loves drafting offensive linemen, but it's been actually surprising that he hasn't. Well, he didn't last year, or this most recent draft. They have Elijah Klein in the wings. I think he loves having that depth. But it's interesting with safety because after Tyke and Antoine, it's all undrafted free agents. And, a lot of these guys are undrafted free agents for a reason. This actually plays in well with this super sticker from Marshall Walker of $4.99. Thank you very much, Marshall, who says, what do you think about Winfield and Tyke? I see the best starting safeties, at least in the NFC, in the making. I don't know as of yet, like how they are as a safety duo compared to the rest of the league in the NFC. I'd have to look at like every single roster. It has the potential to be a top three. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Obviously, this hinges on Antoine Winfield Jr. regaining his stature that he was as an all-pro player 2 seasons ago. But I'm really excited about Tyke if he's able to play a full season. I mean, let's remember, he was tied for the team lead in forced fumbles and interceptions, and that was playing, 65 to 75% of the snaps versus 100% of the snaps, which is what a starting safety does in this Bucs defense. So there's a reason why Todd Bowles has always been like, oh, he's a veteran. He's got a veteran mindset, but he just happens to be a rookie. I think if he can stay healthy, he's got a chance to be like the true definitive playmaker of this team.
Yeah, I would agree. But the best starting safeties in the NFC, that's tough. Because honestly, right now, and I'm going to get hate for this, I don't think this is the best safety duo in the division. I think that goes to Atlanta. Atlanta's safety duo of Bates and Fuller, and then you draft Xavier Watts.
Yeah, I liked him too. I wanted the Bucs to get him.
ooh, they were so close to having both Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts. I probably would have lost my mind. But Watts, you want ball hawks. That's Xavier Watts. So their safeties really scare me. But Tyke, I mean, we again last year we saw the flashes of how good that kid really can be. Injuries kind of derailed him. He was in, he was out, he was in, he was out. But this is a player that he has a nose for the football. He's incredibly intelligent. He's so quick that duo could look pretty similar to what we saw in 2020, 2021 with the safety combinations that they had there with Whitehead and Edwards and Antoine. So I am excited about their potential, but I need to see it first because I loved Tyke at slot corner. Mm-hmm. So, hopefully he's even better at safety than he was, in the nickel last year. But I need to see it before I can get too excited. Again, cautiously optimistic.
That's for sure. The potential is no doubt about it is there, but we're talking about the first year of Tyke as a starting safety versus nickel. And yeah, he was really good in the nickel, but you're not playing as much compared to when you are a safety. Got another super chat to get to. Thank you to Meets McGee for this $5 super chat. Yeah. Who says, do you believe Bowles has overtaken Tony Dungy? Dungy was a great leader, but very stubborn. Bowles won division titles compared to Dungy's one. It's an interesting concept. And I actually spoke about this with Bailey Adams not too long ago. If Todd coaches for 3 more seasons and gets 10 wins apiece, he'll tie John Gruden for the most wins in Bucs coaching history. It's a little bit different because, yes, division titles matter. And at the end of the day, that's all you see on the banners at the stadium, at the practice facility. It is a little watered down, in my opinion, when it's an 8-9 division title and to a degree 9-8 as well. But again, when you look at the resume, you don't see 2022 division champion 8-9 record. You just see division champion. I still think Dungy is held in such high regard, and it's different now because he is a Hall of Famer and he went on to win a championship, not with the Bucs, but he helped set up the Bucs for their first championship. I don't think Bowles is there just yet, but if he does this for even 2 more seasons, you can't really argue the numbers after that point.
No, and to me, I think the tiebreaker for that one would be Bowles has to at least get to an NFC championship because Tony Dungy did do that. Mm-hmm. Bert Emanuel caught the ball. That's all I'm going to say about it. But he did have that NFC championship appearance, held the greatest show on turf to 12 points. So Todd needs to at least match that. He can rack up more wins than Dungy. He can rack up more division titles than Dungy, but you need to at least get to that point before, in my opinion, he can surpass Dungy as the 3rd greatest coach in Bucs history. I don't know. I'm not a big Gruden fan. I am a big Gruden fan, but I think he's kind of overhyped in terms of Bucs history compared to what he actually accomplished. He might be one of the worst drafting coaches we have ever seen in franchise history. I put Bruce at number 1. He walked in, won the Super Bowl in his 2nd year, and that was all she wrote. And he's a big reason that Tom Brady came to Tampa. So I put him at number 1, Gruden by default at number 2, Dungy at 3, Bowles at 4. Outside of that, there's really not a, God bless John McKay, but those are some bad teams.
Yeah, a lot of wins, but even more losses and stuff like that. Yeah. So, it's a little apples and oranges with it. And, postseason success should dictate a lot of that. So I think that's a really good point. We've still got a couple names to get to, but we are wrapping up the show as well. So we'll go a little rapid fire with some of these players. Sure. I put Hassan Reddick on the list, again, not because he's fighting for his job or anything like that. With the contract that they gave him, he's going to be starting an outside linebacker. But of course, there is the question of, can he tap into the Hassan Reddick that he was with the Eagles a couple of years ago, or was his 1 sack year with the Jets more indicative of what is going to come with him? So What are your thoughts about Hassan Reddick going into the season? Can he tap into the guy that he was 2 or 3 seasons ago?
I think he absolutely can. This is a really motivated player to show that he is still that guy that played for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that, again, it was a New York problem, not a player problem. Um, and, my big thing with Reddick is I don't need him to get double-digit sacks in order to consider his signing a successful one. Is he also elevating Yaya Diaby? Is he also elevating Kalijah Cansey? Is he also elevating, Anthony Nelson and Chris Braswell and bringing some of these younger guys along? So if Yaya gets 3 or 4 more sacks this year than he did last year, Cansey gets 2 more, Reddick gets 8, all of a sudden the total number goes up. So it doesn't have to be double digits from one guy if the entire team increases it by 15. If you're getting 1 more a game, that's going to go a really, really long way. So, hopefully Reddick garners the attention that he should have in New York last year because of his reputation coming out of Philly. But I wouldn't say that the individual success is going to dictate anything. It's going to be about what he does for the defense as a whole.
Yeah, and I think being there for all of training camp and stuff will benefit in more ways than I think people realize. Even if it rubs off on David Walker or Chris Braswell, stuff like that too. I think having that established veteran presence. I know Yaya Diaby wants to be a leader, and he rightfully so will. But Reddick, I think, brings a little bit something different that can unlock stuff for him and the rest of the edge rushers as well. These next 3 receivers, Trey Palmer, Cameron Johnson, and Tez Johnson, they're in a situation where they are fighting for roster spots. Because we know the top 4, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then whichever one you want to put 3 and 4 of Emeka Egbuka and Jalen McMillan. But Trey Palmer and, Cameron Johnson, these are guys, and Tez Johnson too, because he is a 7th round pick. The depth is so loaded. Rakim Jarrett is another guy as well. The depth is so loaded at wide receiver. They almost have to keep 6 just because the group is so good. You want to be able to hold on to any of these guys, really. But what are your thoughts about Trey Palmer and Cameron Johnson and Tez Johnson too? Because we all love him as an interview, but can he crack that punt return job?
Yeah, I think Tez, to me, is kind of the leader in the clubhouse already, and it's because of what he could bring on special teams. Now, we have to see him actually do it, but that's kind of the hope, right? Trey Palmer has not really been as effective as I think Todd and Jason were hoping he would be in terms of special teams. And then, Cam Johnson, Rakim Jarrett, these guys, again, this is why it's my number 1 battle in training camp to watch, because you mentioned the top 4, then I think you have Tez and Shep mixed in there. Are they going to keep 7? Because then it's the battle between Johnson and Jarrett and Palmer and Miller and these other guys for that final spot. And then you're going to see some guys get shifted over to the practice squad. But now you're in danger of losing them because these are guys that could be number 4, number 5 receivers on other teams that are going to be 6, 7, 8 in Tampa, and they're going to get plucked and put on 53-man rosters. So I like Trey. I just think they don't draft Tez if they're happy with what they've seen out of Trey Palmer. And, being Bucky's buddy and all of that, I think plays into it as well. And, they obviously were able to do their homework. I'm sure they, got a feel for whoever they were talking to when they were looking at Bucky, and just the electricity that Tez can bring, I think kind of puts him above the rest. I'm still excited about the potential of Jarrett and Johnson, but are they ready to be in that role quite yet? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, because Cameron Johnson was electric last year, but then, he got hurt in training camp. He didn't even really play a preseason game until that last one. But thinking about having Cameron Johnson and Tez Johnson together as like gadget players and things like that, and I wouldn't rule out Cameron Johnson either. Tez Johnson, I hope that his tackle breaking ability and his ability to make guys miss when he was at Oregon translates to the NFL level too, because I think that will go a long way. Sterling Shepard, I think, is a lock for the practice squad because he pretty much said, like, I don't want to play with anyone else but Baker. And let's remember, he began on the practice squad last year too. So I think if you're able to kind of keep him on the practice squad, I don't think other teams are going to pluck him the way that they would Tez Johnson for sure, even Trey Palmer to a degree. Because remember, there was that rumor, the Bucs going to trade Trey Palmer, and certainly that didn't come about either. There's one more player.
Trade him for TJ Watt, straight up. Palmer
well,
for Watt.
That's funny. There is a super chat we're going to get to about TJ Watt. But first, I want to give a shout out to Immunity Financial, who have proudly been serving clients across the country since 1980. They can help you with a number of things like brokerage services, investment banking, annuities, sales and training, and so much more. If you want to set up a college account for your kid, if they want to go to college, you can do that as well. And there's not just Immunity Financial offices in Colorado or the Tampa Bay area. They have it all over the continental United States. You can be in Illinois, you can be in Kansas, you can be in Oklahoma. They have it all over the place in Immunity Financial. So give them a call, get a free consultation over at Immunity Financial. Real quick, your thoughts on Rachaad White going into this year? Is he predominantly just going to be a third down back, or can he be an all-purpose guy that becomes a 1-2 punch kind of with Bucky?
I think it's still going to be a semi-shared backfield the same way that we saw last year. It's just the roles are reversed. Bucky's going to be the primary guy. Rachaad's going to be the one that comes in on that third series and fourth series. He's still going to be a short yardage guy. I want to see more of the I can't remember what they were calling it last year, but I want to see both of them in the backfield together.
Pony package.
Yeah, the pony package. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. But I also think this is Rachaad's last year in Tampa. I think he's going to find an opportunity somewhere else where he can go back to being that number one role. I'm sure there's going to be teams out there that are going to offer him that. I would have said Carolina. I don't think that's going to happen. You'll reunite with right. Dave Canales, but Rachaad's saying all the right things. He's doing all of the right things, but I don't think he's going to be happy with the diminished role. Same way Ronald Jones wasn't when playoff Lenny translated into 2021 starting Lenny. So I hope the duo is as dynamic as it was last year. I don't see it lasting past this year, but Jason Light's done a great job. Finds another running back on day 3 of the draft and keeps it moving, and they just continue to cycle these guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate if Rachaad White is back. I think he's still very important to this team. But yeah, if he wants to be the top guy, there's definitely going to be way more of a market for him than there ever was Ronald Jones a couple of years ago. No slight to Ronald Jones, but Rachaad White is proven a lot more. By the way, a quick thank you to our Pewter Platinum members. Thanks for your support of Pewter Report TV. To Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Hezo813, Ash Fishpool, Joel L. Regan, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zach Brannigan, RP89, Eric McMillan, Connor for Reals, Kevin Thomas, Mario Thomas, Zach Jarvis, Leighton Carter, The Guy is Gifted, and Brandon Riley. Thank you so much to you all for your support of PewterReport.com, for being a platinum member. TJ Watt, we got a question about. What would you give up for TJ Watt, says Dante London. Thank you for the $1.99 super chat. I really wouldn't go after TJ Watt at this point. I mean, he's over 30 years old. He's going to cost a ton of money, like $40 million. That's what, you kind of went after a top edge rusher with Hassan Reddick for an absolute bargain. So unless the Steelers are like absolutely desperate, I'm certainly not giving up a first-round pick, just knowing how Jason Light loves his draft picks and stuff like that. I would give up, if you can ensure he's going to be on the team for the next 4 seasons. But even again, the cap number is so high for a guy like TJ Watt. I'd give up a third rounder, but again, they're going to want more than that. I'd give up maybe 2 third rounders of the next 2 years, just because, again, he's over the age of 30. He's going to hit the decline sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I would be willing to spend a little bit more, but again, I would want the assurance that he signs the extension before we can work out an extension before the trade goes through. But I would trust Jason and Mike to get the financials where they need it, and add in void years or whatever. I'd give up the same thing I would have given up for Hendrickson. I'd give up 2 seconds. Yeah. Maybe even a player, depending on who. somebody on an expiring contract, Jamel Dean, Rashad White, somebody like, like that, who you're probably not going to be able to re-sign after the season anyway, for TJ and a fourth or a fifth.
Yeah, that's actually that's a good idea. Like, throw in Rashad White and make it a second and a third or something like that. That would be
100%. But I mean, I would love for the Bucs to get a guy like TJ or Hendrickson, but hopefully Hassan is that guy.
Yeah.
And he has every bit, as much success as either one of those players do. And then you don't have to worry about trading. You just bring back Hassan for a couple more years. Jason has a reputation. If we sign you to a 1-year prove it deal and you prove it, you're going to get rewarded for that.
And the Bucs have a history of bringing back their guys, and then there's a sense of loyalty because, hey, the Bucs found him when nobody else wanted him after that disastrous year. So, we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's a lot of fun to talk about potential of TJ Watt or Trey Hendrickson back in the day, even Myles Garrett when he was available. But the reality is Hassan Reddick's going to be the guy this year, along with Yaya Diaby and the rest of this group. James, this has been a ton of fun. I can't thank you enough for joining the show this afternoon. Please let everybody know where they could follow you on social media and check out your show and your YouTube channel.
On Twitter at @JYarko_Bucs and at Locked On Bucs. And then, of course, the Locked On Bucs podcast. It's on YouTube. It's on all your podcast platforms. Right now, I'm at 3 days a week, but here in about 2 weeks, we're back to 5 days a week for basically until June of next year. So lots to always talk about. But Matt, always appreciate jumping on with you. I love you guys over there at Pewter Report. Love chatting with you whenever I can.
Yeah, for sure. The feeling is mutual. So make sure you follow James on his social media and his YouTube channel. Then also make sure you're following Pewter Report on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Let us know who you think needs to have a hot start to training camp this year. So that'll do it for us on today's show. Tomorrow, we're talking about Bucs bold predictions for the 2025 season. So until then, for James Yarko, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.